Hello, my name is Don Hammond. I'm an Alton Town Councillor. Thank you very much for joining this presentation. I'm going to start by reading from this briefing document that the Town Council issued a few weeks ago. The King's Pond has been a public amenity since the 1960s, valued by the local community for its landscape, wildlife, peace and quiet, and for offering a piece of countryside in the town. Our common objective must be to enhance and maintain the site in the most sustainable way for the well-being and enjoyment of current and future generations. There is no doubt that the King's Pond project will be the most significant thing that Alton Town Council will undertake in a generation or more. Whether we're thinking in terms of public opinion, cost, potential environmental benefit and impact, benefits to current and future generations of residents. It's a big project. It is important that as many people as possible are involved in discussing the way forward. We've got to get it right.
The debate about King's Pond and its future has history, of course. Over the years, Alton Town Council has commissioned a number of reports. A significant one from Maintain in May 2022. The letter from the Environment Agency that's referred to here is included as an appendix in the Maintain report. All these documents are available on the Alton Town Council website by following the menus to Green Spaces and King's Pond. What do we mean by offline? At the moment, the pond is on line of the River Weir. The river flows in one end, it flows out the other end. The pond is effectively part of the river. It is online. If a pond was offline, it would be separate from the river, so to one side with the river bypassing it, flowing past it, perhaps supplying a bit of water to the pond, but essentially they would be separate. That would be offline. What are the problems we're trying to deal with? The pond is heavily silted. That's readily evident at the southern end of the pond. The silting is a continuous process. There are fluctuations in the water levels in the pond. This is just down to the changes in through flow from the river, rainwater and groundwater, but it's also because the grid at the Weir gets blocked with fine material very quickly, and so the water level can fluctuate. This has eroded the banks and the islands and the revetments, the things that are there to hold the banks up over the years. So the banks are in a poor condition. Partly also due to human activity and to the number of waterfowl climbing in and out of the pond. The pond and Weir block the normal life and functions of the river. A river would normally carry sand and silts and gravels down along its length, refreshing habitats and different ecologies at different points on the river, and that would change according to how much water was flowing. The pond stops that. It is essentially a large silt trap, so the water comes into the pond, water slows down, the silt drops out and it builds up. Doesn't get carried on down the river. The Weir is a block on the functions of the river. Aquatic life can't get up or down past it. Fish particularly can't get upstream past the Weir, so there's a cut between the life of the river below the pond and above the pond. The river downstream is adversely affected by the pond being online. Chalk stream water is normally cool. It comes out of the ground. It's cool and relatively low in nutrients, and the chalk stream ecology is based on that. With the pond, the water comes into the pond, it warms up in the sun, particularly warms up, and it also picks up a nutrient load from all the waterfowl and bottom feeding fish. And so when the water leaves the pond, it is no longer chalk stream water, and that changes the ecology downstream. The next couple of slides are self-explanatory, so I'm not going to give you a commentary. restore the pond to the depths achieved by the last dredging in 1996, we would have to remove 10,000 cubic metres of silt. That's similar to the amount that was removed in 1996. It was about 9,500 cubic metres then. The silt is polluted with hydrocarbons and metals. The hydrocarbons are coming mainly from the road runoff, so this is waste fuel from badly burnt fuel from car exhausts and so on, and it's also got metal, lead and zinc in it, probably from historic industrial use of the river or the sites around the river upstream. That's similar to the testing that was done in 1996. Also found problems with metals. Back then they didn't test for hydrocarbons, so we don't have a comparison. The silt would be acceptable for landfill. It's not considered enormously toxic, but it can't be used on agricultural land, allotments or gardens. We could reuse it on site if we had room for it, but we'd have to cap it with a better material so that it protects people from any injury. The Water Environment report, which is also available on the website, it's called the Weir Feasibility Report. Water Environment advised that the weir could be removed, and they've set out the options that would be available. We're going to go through those options on later slides. It's worth noting that South East Water are considering improvements to the River Weir. They've been studying the river from its source right down to its junction with Caker Stream, which is near Aldi on Mill Lane. They are concerned about getting the amount of water they extract from the chalk aquifer right, so they don't cause the river to dry up, but also that they don't allow flooding. And they're also looking at other improvements, including giving a certain amount of thought to mitigation of a well-identified silt problem at Brick Kiln Lane. We're now going to go through the options set out in the Weir Removable Feasibility Study prepared by Water Environment Limited, which I've already said is available on the Alton Town Council website. There is always the do nothing option. It's not really sustainable. What would happen is that the pond would fill slowly and become smaller, surrounded by encroaching wetland and scrub. This process is already visible for those who are regular visitors over the last few years. You can see this happening at the southern end of the pond. Water Environment, as their option 1, point out that it would be worth improving the debris screen. This is a photograph with it partly blocked by fine material. The bar spacing is only 50mm, and the normal spacing for this sort of screen would be 100mm. So if it was changed, there would be less build-up of fine material. That means a slightly lower flood risk, and it also means less maintenance work. At the moment, the screen is cleared daily by Town Council staff. There's the dredging option, removing the silt and keeping the pond the same shape as it is now. This would restore the depth, so when it was dredged in 96, at this end it was dredged about 1.75 metres deep, this end is about 1.25 metres deep, and each side of the island it was about 1 metre deep. Again, you can see that that is now considerably reduced with the silting over time. So the silt could be removed, and then really we should perhaps call this dredging plus, because we can do some other works on top. So we can do what we can to reduce the amount of silt coming into the pond from various sources by attending to local drainage, but also putting in some silt traps and so on. We could do some planting for some ecological enhancements. Those sort of things. We could create some reed beds and so on. The path around the pond would remain as it is. Well, perhaps a better path this side, but there would be a route right around the pond. And it's worth emphasising that all the work that would need to be done in the woodlands and grasslands surrounding the pond are the same in any of these options, because really the options are what do we do about the area that's occupied by the pond at the moment. But there's a lot of silt. 10,000 cubic meters. What do we do with the silt? When the pond was first dredged, when the town council acquired the sites, the silt was used to form this island. When the pond was dredged in 1996, the silt was actually mostly deposited here. Some was put on the islands, but a bund was created here. All the silt was deposited behind it, allowed to dry out over time, and then covered with soil, basically. So that's where the picnic tables are now, and you can see there's a slight hollow where the picnic tables are, and that's where the silt continued to dry out and settle. But we don't really have room for the silt, so we've got to take it off site perhaps. So, but 10,000 cubic meters, the cost of tipping that into landfill is probably £250,000, maybe a little more. So that's a big chunk out of any budget. So we need to try and find alternatives if we can. Next option is to retain some silt on site. This is a rather dramatic slide which shows this large area of the pond filled in, but it gives you an indication of the volume of silt that has to be dealt with. It doesn't have to be there, it could be anywhere. We could be saying, well, we'll fill in part of this, we could fill in, make these two channels narrower, put some of it here, but basically you would have to sacrifice part of the pond. We've run out of places on the bank to deposit that sort of volume of silt. Not ideal, but that is another option. The feasibility study tells us that the weir could be removed, and then goes on to set out the options that would be available if we did remove the weir. The first two or three are not really very valuable, but we'll go through them for the sake of completion. So you could remove the weir and then do nothing, let the river and the pond find its own way through the site. Has no merit apart from being very cheap, but you end up with a smaller pond and you end up with a very slow flowing river, so not worth considering. We could remove the weir and then do a bit of landscaping to improve the look of what was left, but it would still be a smaller online pond with a slow moving river. Again, not an attractive option, I don't think. This is the first option that involves major landscaping and reinstatement works on the site. It would create a smaller offline pond, a river running from the current entry point to the weir, which has been removed at the weir position at this point. There would be shallow wetlands, that's in this light blue colour. These would vary in how wet they were according to the time of year and the level of water in the river. And the light green areas are where land would be reformed using the silt. Again, in this option there would be a route right round the pond, and the work to be done to woodland and grassland around here is the same. The rather stark line here is actually just an access route, which would be grass, but perhaps reinforced grass so that a small machine could be run on it if necessary for maintenance. The fall from here to here in the river is only 300 millimeters, which is not very much over that distance of 360 or 70 meters. So that's why the river is shown fairly straight, and it would be a slow moving river, which is not ideal. But we have more habitats, we have pond, we have wetland, more habitat options. At the end of the summer, we were able to take advantage of the low water flow to survey the chambers downstream of the Weir, and that gives us the final piece of information we needed to prepare all these options. This is the Weir chamber. There's a concrete chamber here where you stand on the concrete with the handrail around it looking out over the pond. Ponds here. These are the manhole covers on top that you stand on. There's a large chamber under there, and then there are two pipes that go from that chamber to a very large chamber the other side of the hedge and wall to Waterside Court. Nobody's quite sure who owns this chamber, but it's on the river. The water flows out of this chamber in another two large pipes. So this is a section through. So looking at this from sideways, that's the pipe coming in, one of these pipes coming in, and that's the pipe going out, one of these pipes going out. We finally managed to get down into this chamber, and you can see that it's very large, and the water tumbles down a series of steps before it flows out. That is about 1200 millimeters, something like that. So with a bit of civil engineering work, you could lower this chamber, lower these pipes, so that this pipe was actually at this level, the same level as the outlet pipe. That would then give that additional fall of 1200 millimeters or so that could be used for the river through the site. This is the option that assumes that that modification has been done. Those chambers have been changed so that the outflow level is lower. That enables a longer river, a windier river, which would be faster flowing, so more like a healthy chalk stream, rather similar to the work that's been done within the brewery site, where the river there has been deculverted and is being restored, and the half of it that's been done looks very good, like a chalk stream. So the river winding its way through the site. In this option, two smaller ponds, shallow wetlands in what light blue again, shallow wetlands, and then green areas with made up ground. This is just a first shot at this. This pond could be this side, this pond could be here. It's just a first draft of an idea of what could be achieved. Again, this is just an access route, maintenance route. Same sort of things being done to try and capture silt and so on, but again, greater variety of habitats with wetland and ponds. The idea of having a smaller pond is perhaps to be able to create one which is a bit more natural than the main pond where the duck feeding goes on. If we could create a pond where there was less human interference, then that could perhaps achieve a more natural state. So that's the idea of having two ponds rather than one. The final option identified by Water Environment is river through the site, fast flowing winding river through the site with wetland either side of it, no large pond, a small pond. That's not likely to be acceptable to very many people, because we all want a pond of some size. So I'm not going to linger over that option. So from all those options, it seems that there are two that would be worth considering to take forward. The first is dredging, dredging plus, so ideally with all the silt being removed from site, but perhaps having to retain some of it on site and sacrifice a small area of the pond if the cost of removing the silt is prohibitive. Again, dredging plus, because there would be works done to reduce silt, try and enhance the biodiversity on the site with some planting and so on, but essentially dredging, reinstating the pond very much as it is. The other option is pond and river, so ideally including the lower of the outlet level so that we get the nice windy river, fast flowing river through the site, but that might have to be modified if the costs of lowering are absolutely prohibitive. So I'm sure we can all think of advantages and disadvantages of each of those options, and we'll come briefly onto those on the next slide, although this is of course where we had quite a lot of good questions and good suggestions and good discussion when we had the public sessions. Dredging plus, the advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage is that we know what the finished project would look like. It's low risk, we know what it would look like because we've already got it there. The pond would stay large, it would be approximately the same size as it is now, and obviously there would be disruption to wildlife while the dredging was being done. It would have to be done outside the breeding season, so probably in September, October, November, December, that time of the year. So there'd be disruptions to the wildlife for a while, but then basically the same wildlife that we have now would reinstate itself. The disadvantages: it's not sustainable. The silting will continue, so significant dredging would be necessary again sometime in the future. We haven't done anything about the negative impacts on the River Weir, and there has been no change in the range of habitats or biodiversity on the site. We might achieve a small improvement with some of the planting and so on that we can perhaps do, but no significant change. River and pond option. Advantages of this are that it's a sustainable solution. There would be no need for major dredging in the future. The negative impacts on the River Weir are removed and gives the opportunity to restore a long section of the River Weir. So if one combined the three things of modifying the weir so that we have good continuity for the river, restoring 360 odd metres of River Weir through the King's Pond site, and combine that with the restoration that's going on elsewhere upstream, then we have a significant restoration of a chalk stream. There would be improved range of habitats and biodiversity. Wetland is good for wildlife, and we would be introducing a river habitat as well, whilst retaining obviously a pond habitat. The disadvantages: well, many would see that the reduction in the waterfowl population as being a disadvantage. Others might see it as a positive. And there would be other changes in the natural populations of birds and animals. The changes in environment, in habitats, and the size of those habitats would cause changes. But I think overall there would be more biodiversity. It is of course a higher risk option. We don't yet know, without more design work and so on, we don't know what the final result would look like. There are some decisions for Alton Town Council to make. As we pointed out on an earlier slide, the Council is already committed to going ahead with a technical and financial assessment of the dredging option. Must also now decide if it wishes to consider the technical and financial assessment of the pond and river option as well. They can both be done at the same time. Much of the work, such as particularly things like ecological surveys and so on, is the same for both options. So it would make sense to carry out both at the same time. That will cost money, so funds have to be approved to carry on with the studies. of either option. And as at every stage, the Town Council will reaffirm that the options will be put for public consultation before the final decision is made. It's worth stressing that other people have a big say in what happens to the pond. Since the pond was dredged in '96, there's been a lot of new environmental legislation introduced, and we will have to comply with that. So we will need planning approval from the EHDC, and we will need permits from the Environment Agency. They may like our ideas, they may not, and they may make requirements of us as to put conditions and restrictions on what we do and don't do. But certainly they will demand that we go through a lot of hoops to get those approvals, so particularly ecological assessments, environmental impact assessments and the like, which are all demanded by the current legislation. They're also perhaps easier to manage other regulatory compliance, waste management and CDM, which is health and safety. From here, the project will proceed through 3 stages. Whether we're looking at one option or 2 options, we need to do sufficient work so that we can get to a full information for proper public consultation and a decision. Once we've got that decision, stage 2 would be the detailed design and approvals and the appointment of a contractor. Stage 3 would be the works on site. For the stage 1, we can go through a pre-application consultation process with the planners and with the Environment Agency, so we can start a conversation with them. This is what we want to do. What do you think? What do you need from us to satisfy yourselves that it's going to be okay, environmentally, etc. There will be flood risk assessments because we're messing around with the main river, so the Environment Agency will be interested to know what impact that will have on the river. So there's a lot of work to be done. So they'll tell us what they need. We need to do sufficient engineering and landscape design in sufficient detail for everybody to be able to see exactly what it is that is being proposed, and we also need to work out how much it's going to cost and think about where we might get the money from. We would then go through full public consultation, and if we are looking at 2 options, we then decide on which option to proceed with before we go into the detailed design and getting to the point of appointing a contractor. We are some way away from this. Just to give an idea of the complexity of the work involved, these are some of the things that has to happen. Project management, CDM, that's the health and safety. Again, there needs to be a continuous thread of health and safety through the project from now right through to completion. We need planning consultants to help us deal with the Environment Agency and the Planning Authority. There are a lot of ecological surveys and impact assessments to be done. Many of these are seasonal, but they have to be done at the right time of the year. So, for example, at the moment, there needs to be a overwintering bird survey. Very soon in the spring, we'll be needing to look at a breeding bird survey, and then early in the summer, there will be a more detailed look at the flora on the site, the plants on the site, and at the appropriate time, looking at invertebrates and so on. Whole series, I haven't listed them all, but there's a whole series of ecological surveys that need to be done, and environmentalists will have to do impact assessments to say what would they think would happen if a particular option was followed. There's a lot of hydrological modelling, that's working out what happens to the water, and flood risk assessments. So that applies to not just the river option, but also to the dredging option, surprisingly. But we would have to do hydrological modelling to demonstrate to the Environment Agency that there was no significant change in flood risk. There is the engineering design, that's working out levels, what sort of material needs to be used, shape and a landscape architect to make it look nice and advise us where we should have trees planted, where we should take them out, what sort of trees, so that we enhance the site, the overall site. And we need a quantity surveyor to tell us how much it's all going to cost and where the risks are in that costing. A lot of work to be done. Thank you for watching the presentation. We hope you found it useful, and we would appreciate your feedback. Please follow the routes given here, or you can of course email your ward councillor or direct to Alton Town Council. Thank you.